Well, hey, howdy, hey guys, and welcome back to Dan's Pro Shop. Today, I'm a little excited about this one. We are hopefully going to be starting a little bit of a series because we kind of got a little bit of a project slash build going on. Yeah, I know it's nothing earth shattering, nothing exciting. It's certainly not like a 68 Chevelle or anything that I actually want to do, but you take what you can when you can. And boy, let me tell you, I have been in the market for one of these here scooters for a minute. And if you have done any investigating or searching or Facebooking or Craigslisting or however you find your stuff, you know that these things, everybody wants an arm and a freaking leg for one of these things. And it is absolutely ridiculous what the aftermarket and the OE for these things are. We're talking like a new one, minimum like 12 grand, 10 grand. Aftermarket, you want a used one, you're still looking at between like $4,000 and $10,000 for a decent, just like turn the key and go one. So fellas, this is a 2007 Club Car DS. And this just so happens to come with a 4-stroke Kawasaki power plant, a one longer single hole. It ain't nothing impressive. However, it is a Kawasaki. It is a reliable, just do it engine. Now, if you guys are curious about how I acquired this here machine, it was a pure happenstance, fell into the right thing at the right time. A local golf course around here where I live recently got bought out. The new owners wanted to upgrade, got all new carts, and they were selling these things, practically giving them away. I pulled this thing out of there for $1,500. Now, I know it's a bit of a unneeded expense, blah, 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 blah. But if you guys are frequent to the channel, you know that we have a toy hauler. You know that we're into MX racing. I'm into it. The boys are into it. The wife loves it. Like, she's a heck of a pit mom. And this is what we do. We go out, we go camping, we go racing or whatever. And since we have a toy hauler with a ramp in the back, one of these things just fits the bill. And it's been something that I've been looking for. I've been tired of like borrowing or renting or what. It just kind of made sense to, have one of these things in inventory. And since I finally found a chance to get one of these things for what I felt like to be a screaming deal, because this thing is turnkey. You get in there, you turn the key, and you go. There's nothing really wrong with it. But that being said, there is definitely a lot of stuff that we can do to it. There's some basic preventative maintenance stuff like we're going to get into today, and a whole bunch of aftermarket stuff that we're definitely going to get into. So the whole point of today's video is these guys right here. We're going to be replacing the drive belt and the starter generator belt. These things are redonkulously cheap. Don't worry, I will put everything down in the description. This is Oliphant, I don't know, some crap you've never heard of, on Amazon. It is a belt kit for these things. I believe it was like $24 or something for both belts, the drive and the starter generator. And from what I can tell, now don't get me wrong, I am rather novice at these things, but I'm also a mechanic. It's a machine. It's got wheels, it's got a drive line, it's got a steering wheel. It's practically a lawnmower engine with like a Ski-Doo centrifugal drive. There's not much to it. And from what I can tell, these belts come on, they come off. You tension the generator belt. But yeah, if you're looking to do a similar project like this for yourself, or if you're getting into this, or heck, purely for entertainment value, welcome. Come on in, I'll show you what's going on, and hopefully this is as easy as I anticipate it to be. So just in case you are new to these things, I'm not kidding you. There really ain't much to them. Like, arguably, a regular ride-on lawn tractor is probably more complex than these things are. Whenever it comes to working on these things, everything you need to do and or get to right here under the seat. And not only does it flip up like this to give you easy access to everything, they pop right off. You can get to whatever you need to, and effectively the hood is completely out of your way. So what we're looking at getting in here too today is right down in here. I know it's a little dark and a little difficult to get to, but right here, this guy is our drive belt, and the smaller one right next to it is the starter generator. So you can see the motor up there, and then the flywheel down here on the end of the motor. We're going to be replacing both of these belts. So just in case you guys are new to this or you are unfamiliar, a starter generator, that's kind of an odd term. Well, it is what it says it is. It starts the engine and it acts as a generator. So if you're familiar with like an alternator in your car, once the car is started and running, the alternator is responsible for recharging your electrical system. So it basically maintains a good level of charge in your battery. Well, with these things, a starter generator does both. So whenever you hit the gas pedal, it tells that starter generator to start cranking until it sees a signal from the RPM on the engine saying, hey, I'm running. Then the starter stops spinning, like it stops generating rotation. And then it takes the rotational energy from the engine and effectively turns the starter into a generator that then charges your battery from what it lost from the starting cycle. They are super simple. They have been around for freaking ever. Like, this used to be a super normal thing in automotive that you would see, but that was a long time ago. Since then, we have gone to separate starters and alternators. But these things, there is not much to them. They're basically just a DC motor that you use to crank the engine. And once the engine has started, it then back charges the electrical circuit to charge your battery. However, this thing is belt driven with a V belt. And this thing, since it's an 07 and it used to be, an on the golf course club car, this thing, it's beat up a little bit. Not saying it's not in good shape. I am super ecstatic about how well this thing is for what I paid for it and how cheap the parts are. Like, man, you just go through the Amazon and look up anything like shocks, rear springs, ball joints, bushings, they're all cheap. Now, I know they're not genuine OE parts, but it's cheap. So we'll go ahead and get into this thing, yank that starter generator belt off, yank off the power transmission belt, and yeah, we'll get this thing going in no time. Guys, please excuse the lack of space here, but you can tell that I'm rapidly running out of it. But, the project must go on. So here we are. Now, you take note here, the back of this thing is still very stock, like it's right off the golf course. So it has one of these mount things here for where you would put your golf bags. If you have a different one or different configuration or whatever, the one with the rear seat, this may be a little more difficult, but might as well get prepared for that because that's definitely what I'm doing. It is on the list for this because it's basically going to be a family wagon. I don't care about dragging around golf clubs. We're going to be dragging around people. So since we've already removed the hood or the front bonnet, as our friends across the pond would call it, this thing right here, this black cover, is like the rear hood or the rear engine cover or something that Club Car would call it. This simply just gives you access to the rear end of the engine and a really good top view of that starter generator and the final drive of that drive belt that we're going to be working on. So we'll go ahead and remove this thing. I will go ahead and throw your noggin in there so you can get a better look at what's going on, and we can hopefully do this repair rather quickly. Now, depending upon the age of yours and how stock it still is, the original factory hardware for this thing would be just a number 3 Phillips head screw. However, this thing has been in and out of since 2007, so I'm assuming the factory rib nuts or whatever, pretty well toast. So there are some self-tapping screws in here. So for this particular one, I'm going to need a 3/8 socket and a number 3 Phillips. Let's go ahead and yank this thing apart, huh? Alrighty, now that we got that cover removed, there you can see the top end of the starter generator, the end of the exhaust system, a little bit of wiring, and kind of the belts that we're going for. The larger one on the bottom right there is the drive belt, and this guy right here is the starter generator. So you guys can see here the bracket underneath the starter generator motor is an adjustment bracket. So we're going to go ahead and loosen some of the hardware on this thing, get some slack in that belt, remove it, and get to working. Alrighty, since I know it's going to be next to impossible for you to see this while I'm doing it, you see these two bolts right here, this guy and this guy. We're just simply going to need to loosen those since those are the pivot for the starter generator. And this bolt right here, which is a 1/2 inch, we're going to need to loosen that also to allow this entire assembly to rotate up and loosen the belt tension. So as far as this bolt goes back here, you're just going to need a single 1/2 inch wrench or a ratchet. loosen this thing up. You don't need another wrench because the carriage bolt that goes through the bracket is like retained with a square that goes into the track. So only one side is necessary. But it's probably going to take a little bit of persuasion to get this thing moving the way we need it to, because it doesn't look like it's moved in a minute. So let me get this thing freed up. We'll get it moving in the direction we need to, and then start moving the belt. Man, guys, I really do apologize for the lack of a more appropriate view here, but I'm telling you, I can barely see this thing. It's all tucked up behind the exhaust and whatnot. But once we have those 3 bolts loosened, just yank on the belt, and then that's enough to like pull that motor down. I don't know if maybe even you saw that thing move, but it's super simple. Now that we have this motor loosened, take the belt off and we'll just let it sit there. In order to take this belt off, we need to remove the drive belt, which luckily everything is in the kit. So we'll go ahead and start doing this now, and I know there's a little trick to this. So here's a little bit better view of what's going on here. We just removed the starter generator belt from this pulley right here that goes up to the pulley on the starter generator, but you can tell here that it's captured behind the starter, or the drive belt. So either way, we're gonna have to remove that. That rear pulley, you see how it's significantly less deep than the front centrifugal clutch here? We're going to go ahead and use a screwdriver to help this thing kind of peel up over the edge, because it is like these belts aren't super tight. That's the whole point of the centrifugal clutch. Whenever this thing starts moving, these pulleys, the sides, get closer together, grip the belt, and then change the ratio from drive to driven. So we're going to take advantage of that fact that this belt is loose, just pop it off the rear pulley, and then replace the belt. So I got myself here in a nice little handy dandy flat blade screwdriver. I'm going to go ahead and try to stick this in between the belt and the outside of the pulley. Well, if you don't throw stuff and drop it everywhere, yeah, maybe. Well, that thing went clean up in the wheel well. Look at that. All right, so the plan is, it's maybe even easier to do it from back here. Start rotating this thing and see if we can't get the belt to ride up over the edge of the pulley. Oh, and another little dad hack here. It significantly helps put your cart in neutral. That allows the rear end to drive freely, so you can spin this thing that's not trying to spin the tires. All right, now I kind of got it like halfway. I'll stick you in there so you can see what I mean. I know that's difficult to describe. So this is what I meant by sticking your screwdriver in between the outside of the pulley and the belt. Simply all we're trying to do is remove the slack from the drive pulley, take it up in the driven, and that gives us enough room to pull the belt over the outside of the pulley without disassembling anything. So now we're going to go ahead and keep doing this, pull it all the way out, and then we can replace the starter generator and put on the new drive belt. Grab our new belt since we're up there. Keep on moving this thing around, nice and easy. And there we go. There is our old drive belt. Now, this guy isn't even in terribly bad shape, and I didn't originally anticipate on replacing this belt. However, I was naive to how cheap these stupid belts were. So, I mean, this one's not really bad. I mean, it's starting to crack a little bit, but whatever. This might be something that's worth keeping on the shelf just in case, you know? So, now that we have that off, we can easily remove our starter generator belt. And this is the one that I was concerned about. Now, let me show you this belt. And honestly, indulge me for a minute. We'll have a little bit of class about V-belts. So as far as the condition for this here drive belt, hopefully you guys can see this. Look at all that dry rot and cracking on this thing. That pretty much tells you that this thing is cooked and it's time for replacement. And thank goodness they're so cheap. But let's talk about this for a minute. So guys, when it comes to V belts specifically, not cogged belts, not like regular serpentine belts, V belts. Well, I mean, serpentine belts, yeah, too, but just not toothed belts, you know, like the drive belt on a Harley Davidson. V belts. Hopefully I'll have some graphics over here to better explain than just the words are. It is a huge common misconception that V belts need to be dug into the pulleys to work correctly. Now, do you want them to be tight, snug, taut? Yes, but to a point. Whenever it comes to centrifugal drives, that's honestly a little bit different. But either way, with a V belt, the way that these drive, the way that they carry friction from the drive to the driven or reverse, however it works, the belt grips on the sides of the belt, on the inclines, not the base. If you have a belt that goes all the way to the bottom of the V in a pulley, one of two things. Either your belt is completely cooked and the width is no longer what it should be, so it's not gripping on the sides like it originally should, or your pulley is clapped out and it's allowing your new belt to go down too far into the pulley. The way that these things work is that they're just like a chain. Whenever you have something driving a driven component, there's always tension on one side and slack on the other. That's the way it works. So the tension allows this thing to like try to pull itself deeper into that groove than it originally should be. And the sides of this belt just dig in and grip on the sides of the pulley that is driving it. So, just so you guys know, whenever you tension a belt or you're installing a new one, if the belt goes all the way into the base of the pulley, it's wrong. You should look at what's going on. So now that our little mechanical class is over, let's go ahead through these no belts on here and hopefully get this thing going in no time. We'll go ahead and take our handy dandy brand new cheapo kit from Amazon and then go ahead and throw our new belt on here. So since the top side is the more difficult one, we'll go ahead and throw that on there first. We will retension this when everything's all good and done. Put it on the one side there. Come on now. Oh yeah. This one's significantly more snug than the other. Whenever we go to retighten this, it's kind of like a thing with V-belts. You put like a pry bar or something in there, kind of like pull it taut. But now that one's on there, we can go ahead and do the drive belt. Now, this reinstalling a brand new one is probably going to be a little more tricky than removing a stretched old one. So just have some patience with this. I wouldn't necessarily recommend using a screwdriver to reinstall because you have a chance of like damaging the ribs in the belt. But I don't know. We're going to go ahead and give this a go. Just work it, go around the ridges, try to get around the outside of that rear pulley, and then get this thing going. Man, I got to tell you here, even just looking at this, the difference between the new one and the old one, the new one is probably, I don't know, maybe 1/8 of an inch wider than the old one to tell me like how much of the sides have ground off from doing this, because like we now know how V-belts work is they drive from the side. So whenever they wear down, they usually wear down in width. But either way, it's just a nifty little thing to look at. Go ahead, throw this guy back in here where she's supposed to be. We'll go ahead and get as deep as we can into the front drive pulley, and then we'll start working our way around the rear driven. Come on now. Oh, we're like 3/4 of the way there. Come on. There it is. Drive belt is on. Man, going back on was significantly easier than coming off. But now that we have the new belts installed, we'll go ahead and retension the starter generator and give it a go. Now, when it comes to tensioning this starter generator belt, I actually did a little bit of research because I was unsure of what you need. Because like whenever you tighten a belt like to spec to OE specs, there's something that you want to see as a deflection. So like halfway between the drive and the driven pulley, you need to be able to push the belt 3/8 of an inch or whatever it might be. So I was curious about like the actual tautness of this belt. And from everything I can see online, everyone says that you make this belt a lot tighter than you think you should. So the way I'm going to do this, simply stick a pry bar in here on the top of the motor case and underneath the starter generator and just kind of, crank it up until it's good and firm. Then we'll go ahead and tighten the hardware and test for function and kind of go from there. But either way, even if you get this incorrectly the first time, it's easy enough to change. So we'll just go ahead and go with like a little too tight to begin with and then work our way from there. That seems pretty satisfactory there. Come on. Whew. Talk about working blind here. Trying to hold this pry bar and tighten a bolt that you can't see with a closed end wrench. All right. Cool, well that seems decent. I mean, it's not super tight, but it's definitely not loose either. So now that we have that done, we'll go ahead and retighten these front pivot bolts on this bracket up front here. And then we'll do a function test. Now, hopefully you guys can see that decent enough. Again, I apologize, I know it's rough, but go ahead and turn the key on, put this thing in gear. Be careful with the throttle, but we'll give it a go. That is night and day different. Oh, just everything works better. Yeah, I think that'll work just fine. Now, I suppose it's my fault. It was a solid afterthought that I probably should have shown you the concern up front of why we did this. But I mean, like I kind of explained it. The starter generator thing is responsible for cranking the engine. So like more often than not, the starter would slip inside of this belt until it built up enough friction to actually grab this and turn it. I mean, it did work, but it was inefficient, and obviously this belt was cooked. And since we were in there and this belt needed to be removed anyway, why not put a new drive belt on here? For 20 bucks, this thing is going to operate and drive significantly better than it did before. Now, like I mentioned, this is just the first little link in the chain on what is prospectively going to be a decent little build. You know, I already got stuff laying on the bench here. We're going to do a full like factory light kit where you actually cut out the fenders and like it has a real harness and like switches in the dashboard. And speaking of switches, I got like a different aftermarket like switch cluster that's going to go in here with USB outlets and like a digital volt gauge and stuff. We're going to put on a back seat. You know, I don't know. That's just kind of like the stuff right out of the gate that we're doing. I don't know if we're going to lift this thing or not, but either way, like I got some factory like bushings for this thing just to kind of tighten up the suspension. Again, really cheap. I'm not going to need it if we lift it, but either way, you know, the whole kit, the entire cart, every single bushing on the suspension of this thing was for $11. So even if I don't use them, I really don't care. So hopefully this helped you guys out if you were doing or thinking about or having this similar situation. But yeah, please do stick around because we're going to keep on working on this 07 Club Car DS. And I don't know about you, I'm pretty excited. We'll see you guys next time.